Hello, welcome along to a brand new episode of Writer's Routine, where this week we are chatting to Caz Frear, best-selling novelist whose career started by winning a national competition which launched her to debut success. We chat about what she does to get in the right frame of mind, also how she stays creative while dealing with the current all-absorbing pressures of being an author. And you can hear how she's changed her workday to make the most of mornings and also go easy on herself.
Could I actually just get more done if I focused a lot more in the time where I know that my brain works better? I don't know if I'll explain that properly, which then frees me up in the afternoon to just sort of work on new ideas, answer emails, be an author. So, try and kind of, I loathe to say build a brand on social media, but those kind of things, and get all my writing done in the morning. That is my goal. Whether or not I will do that remains to be seen, but I think it's probably a more sane way for me to work.
There is more on the way with Caz Frear in this week's Writer's Routine. Yes, welcome along to the show. My name's Dan Simpson and this is Writer's Routine. Thank you for being there. If you've never joined us before, welcome to the community. We take a look inside an author's working day. We see how they get stuff done. We learn how they plan their day, their work, their life, their space, their family, to give them the best chance of getting words down on the page. And hopefully there's a few tips in there that you can steal for your own life. This week we are with Caz Frear. She's published the Cat Kinsella mysteries. Her books Stone Cold Heart and Shed No Tears have had great success. It all started when she won the Richard and Judy Search for a Bestseller competition. Now, if you're not from the UK, I should probably explain more about Richard and Judy. At one point, they might still be, if I'm honest. Anyway, at one point, they were a TV power couple. Married, and they're the stars. They were stars of morning telly, and they started a book club. And if they selected your novel, well, pretty much it guaranteed success. Bang. Straight in there. You had the little sticker that went on the front cover. It had pride of place in bookshops across the country, and it would sell and sell. Reese Witherspoon, I think, does a similar thing over in the States, right? And it's still around. I'm not quite sure if it has the power as it once did. But a little while ago, they launched a search for a bestseller competition, which Caz won with her novel Sweet Little Lies, and it changed her writing life. It became the bestseller that the competition promised that it would be. But what happened next for Caz? How did she deal with that success when writing her second and third novel? How did it change what she thought of things, thought of the business, thought of creativity? What was life like after her debut? We'll get into that. Her new novel is 5 Bad Deeds. It's all about teacher, mother, wife, and all-round good egg, Ellen Walsh. But it turns out she's done something very, very bad. The problem is Ellen has no clue what it is. It's a tale of revenge and loyalty and secrets close to home. We talk about the tech problems that Caz faces through the day, what she does when she can't get her head around stuff, how she's working through that, also how her process has changed now she's a number of books down, how she's changed her writing day, how she's changed her mindset of things, how she's always working to try and be the best that she can be. We also run through the current pressures of being an author. And this is something that I've spoken about with a few authors recently, and I'm keen not to harp on about it, right? Being a writer is an incredibly privileged life, something that you might be working towards, being there, being published, getting your book out. I'm just quite conscious that the pressures on an author are perhaps greater than they have ever been before. 20, 30 years ago, you'd write, you'd hopefully rely on your publisher to do all the promotion for you. You'd do a few interviews, maybe write a few articles, but that was kind of it. You could get on being creative. But now, with social media being as powerful and as useful as it is that pressure a bit much? Does it take away from your ability to be creative and actually get the words down every day? I wonder, and we talked to Caz about that through the show. does it impact on anything? There's a lot to run through, and we get into it as we always do, starting off with Caz wondering what she sees around her in the place where she sits down to write.
It changes, to be honest. I've got a desk set up in a corner of our kind of living room, dining room. And I've been working on that for the past few weeks because I've been working on a script and I just find it easier on the big screen. Sometimes I work on the sofa. Sometimes occasionally I work in bed. I try not to. It's not very good posture or sleep generally. But so yeah, I'm literally just looking around my living room at all my books. We did complete sort of house renovation not too long ago. So I'm still at that point where I'm sort of looking around the newness of my living room and loving everything rather than, if we were speaking a little while ago, I would have said, I'm looking at cracks in the wall and paint colour that I don't like. And it's not very inspirational, but that's all changed now.
When you were redecorating the living room, and I know the living room is the family space, right? So it can't be completely designed around the fact that you write there. But did you think about making any little touches just to make it slightly easier for when you work there?
Do you know, there wasn't, other than, and this sounds crazy as a writer, but I didn't really have bookshelves before. Well, I did. I had like a sort of rubbishy IKEA one tucked up in our spare bedroom. But probably one of the real extravagances was getting some shelves properly built into a huge alcove. And just having that kind of makes me feel a little bit more connected. And it does help me sometimes, if you're struggling with a scene or you've sort of hit a block, I do sometimes go, it sounds like I'm admitting to plagiarism here. It's not plagiarism, but when you think, I remember that book, they did something a bit similar. I'm going to go and have a look at how they did it. And I've got that all right next to me now. So I think it does provide that inspiration. And I've got all my books and all my sort of foreign rights editions as well. So it's nice when you're having those moments of, I've forgotten how to write, to be able to kind of look up and see all these various different editions and remember that is part of the process.
It's almost like keeping the fire well fed, isn't it? It's like when it's starting to fizzle out, you need some ideas. You need to be reminded that other people have done what you can do. And also, you might not do this much, but I find it sometimes good to look at what other people do and think, you know what, I can do better than this. Yeah, definitely. I think, I always, before I started writing, I think that was always the case. I would either read novels by authors I really loved, and have this kind of, oh God, I will never be as good as this. And then occasionally just pick up a novel and think, well, I could do that. I could do better than that, or I could at least do as well as that. So yeah, it's good to have those reminders literally right next to me. But, and I've also actually just above my, desktop, so in the corner of the living room, I've got a lovely, huge frame poster now of my favourite film. I always say my favourite Christmas film, but I think it's probably my favourite film, which is It's a Wonderful Life. And I know that sounds a bit cheesy, but just having that in front of me sometimes when either you're struggling or you've had, an email from a publisher or agent that's a little bit disappointing or something, there's just this thing right in front of me saying, it's all fine, it's all fine. I enjoy It's a Wonderful Life, but there is the only thing, you have to get through a lot of the film before you get to the wonderful part of it, I think. There's a lot of misery before the wonder. Yeah,
you really do. And whenever I recommend, I mean, a lot of people have seen it, but whenever I recommend it to people, I am kind of a bit, just stay with it. Just stay with it. I completely agree with you. But you sort of, I think you kind of need, they probably could have shaved about 20 minutes off it maybe, but I think you do need quite a lot of the background stuff to then get the wonder of it all as it all starts to unravel. But yeah, I am always saying to people, just stay with it, honestly. And I think bar one or two people, they've always said, yeah, you were right. I'm glad I stuck with it. And I've watched it so many times now. I mean, I love it. I love every single second of it. But sometimes, yeah, I do I'll wander around in the first hour because that's probably like the depressing bit.
You said that, well, you wander around to write. You are moving. What dictates where you are writing?
It's generally, but this is generally, I tend to write my first draft where I'm not overly concerned on the quality, but I am always concerned about the quality, but less concerned about the quality, I suppose, as I am at just getting it down. I tend to write that on the sofa, on my laptop, just go. When it comes to editing, I always move to my desktop because it's just, I think it's good to shift locations. It just shifts something in your brain. This is where I do the first draft. This is where I polish it and make it pretty. But also I can just see more on my desktop. And I think that kind of helps with editing for moving stuff around. And it's just, if it's a really lazy day, I will work in bed, but there's no sort of strategic reason for that.
Because you are moving around, I take it everything is kind of on your laptop. Have you got a sweet system for making notes on there, bullet pointing some things, post-it noting other things? What's the planning like?
Yeah, I mean, I am, on one hand, I am a huge planner to the point where I can nearly spend as much time planning a novel as writing one. But I'm Dickensian in that I just use Excel. I do everything in Excel. I practically write my novel in Excel before I even open Word. So that tends to be, everything goes in there. And I have post-it notes, and I do have things stuck to the wall where I can just see the structure a little bit better. But generally I chapter plan in Excel, color coded, so I can see where things are starting to flag, really. And with it being crime, so I can sort of see, insert red herring here. We haven't had any sort of, I hesitate to use the word twist because it's overused, but maybe we haven't had any major revelation for 3 or 4 chapters. So I know that I need, whatever the next chapter is, there needs to be something that turns the story again in a different direction. So the easiest way for me to do that is Excel. I've tried Scrivener, but I just couldn't. Maybe I didn't try it for long enough, but I just can't quite get on with it.
It's really funny. So I like Scrivener, and they've kind of partnered with the show a few times, but it's really funny when authors try and justify why they've not used it, because they understand that it's this big thing. And it's always like, look, I know people use Scrivener, maybe it was me. And they're very quick to say, look, no, I'm sure it was me. I'm sure I was the one. I know it's this like hallowed ground of softwares. It always makes me chuckle a little bit.
It's just that thing, isn't it? Of like, oh no, this is uncomfortable. I don't fully understand this. It's really, really uncomfortable. I'm going back to Excel, which at some point, I dare say I will push through. I mentioned I'm working on a spec script at the moment, and I was the same when I started Final Draft. I was just like, oh god, I don't understand, but I have no choice. You have to write in Final Draft. So surprise I worked it out, and now I'm pretty proficient in it, and I'm sure I probably would be in Scrivener, but we'll see.
It's all about what works for you. We'll get to the actual daily routine in just a second, but you are with 5 Bad Deeds. Will this be your 4th published novel? So that is, and it's come fairly quickly. You kind of got this, your debut received some recognition around 2017 before it was out in 2018, right? So you've been going at it for a while now. In the, across the span of those 4 books, what have you learned about how you work best? Like where you work, what you need around you, what you need to do to get into the right frame of mind?
I mean, it's ever changing because I'm actually in the process at the moment that I'm trying to think about the rules that I had set for myself for the past 4 books and think about, is that the way that I want to work going forward? So I used to be, and I say used to, and I'm taking 5 Bad Deeds into that because I wrote 5 Bad Deeds a couple of years ago now, as it takes so long, the lead times for books to sell and be published, etc. And I was always very much of the, I used to work in an office, so I'll treat this as an office job. I will work 8:30 to 5:30. I'll have a break for lunch. I will do all these things. But aside from those breaks, I must be writing because this is my job now. I also never have it. I sort of got it into my head. I need complete silence when I write. I find everything really distracting. That changed maybe a year or two ago. And now it's normally just like classic FM because, it's quite relaxing, but I'll have it on so low. In some ways you can barely hear it, but it's just, I can pick up a few bars here and there. But what I've realized over the past year is, I don't know, it sort of makes for quite a lonely existence. It's like, oh my God, I'm spending entire days in complete silence and in my head. And so I've started trying to sort of think about what's actually going to work for me going forward. And I'm doing that now with the script that I'm writing and with the novel that I'm writing. And it's just things like, I know I work far better first thing in the morning and for the rest of the morning up until lunchtime. After lunch, and I have my lunch quite late, so if we're going to say after lunch, about 2:30, my brain just doesn't work in the same way. But historically, I've sort of forced myself through in that, no, you've got to get back to the desk. You've got to do that. You've just got to plow through what you've committed to because this deadline is coming. Whereas now I'm starting to think, could I actually reframe my thinking so that I just work on my novel for 5 hours in the morning, but I work really, really intensely. I've been reading deep work and all these, really interesting books about productivity and social media and all those kind of things. And could I actually just get more done if I focused a lot more in the time where I know that my brain works better? I don't know if I've explained that properly, which then frees me up in the afternoon to just sort of work on new ideas, answer emails, be an author. So, try and kind of, I loathe to say build a brand on social media, but those kind of things, and get all my writing done in the morning. That is my goal. Whether or not I will do that remains to be seen. But I think it's probably a more sane way for me to work rather than in this very sort of rigid, I will make my writing so important, and so I must suffer to write it, I suppose is what I'm saying. I need to think about, no, how do I make it work and how do I make it enjoyable again? Because I think your first novel, you write it and you don't know if anybody's ever going to read it. And obviously you have that self-doubt there, but you don't have the deadline and you don't have previous reviews going around your head, et cetera, et cetera. So by and large, it is a really enjoyable experience. You wouldn't do it otherwise. You wouldn't give up all your free time outside your day job to do it. And I'm trying to sort of, how can I trick myself to get back into that frame of mind?
How much of a shock was it for you? I mean, publishing the debut and writing it, as you say, you're doing it a lot for fun, but there must have been some keenness to become a full-time author. So the idea that everything has changed can't be that much of a surprise, but are you still finding it quite shocking, like the other stuff that you need to do just to give yourself the opportunity to actually write full-time?
Yeah, I think so. Because I had a really weird, well, I say weird, it was fabulous, but it wasn't the standard publishing journey, in that I won this Richard and Judy Search for a bestseller and competition. And I found out I'd won that in the January and the book was on the shelves in the June, which is unheard of. Absolutely unheard of. And we were still editing it, I think, up until March, until London Book Fair. And then it was on the shelves 3 months later. So I didn't necessarily have that sort of, huge lead time where I got to know other authors and I kind of started to understand about the industry and how it works. It was very much like, you've won the competition. Right, let's edit the book. Whoa, it's on the shelves. And then because of the Richard and Judy thing, it was all, it was fabulous. It got a lot of attention. But I think it was just a strange entry point into the business. And it really did take me a year or two of getting to know other authors and getting to know publishing, I suppose, the same as anyone else, to understand that, it's not it's not just about the writing. There's an argument for saying it should be, but I think if we're realistic, it isn't just about the writing now. It's making sure you're connecting with readers, getting out to events, networking, all those kind of things. That doesn't mean that takes precedence. The writing should always take precedence. But yeah, I think just more and more, it's becoming clear that things like, regularly updating social media, newsletters, all those kind of things just help to build a readership that will come back to you time after time. So yeah, it sounds ridiculous that it's taken me quite a while to come to terms with it. That sounds a bit dramatic, but I'm not a natural self-promoter, if that makes sense. I don't mind it, but I'm not, it's not something that comes naturally to me, if that makes sense. If someone asks me, would you like to do an event? I'd love to do that event and I really, really enjoy it, but I wouldn't be going out hustling and getting my own events, if that makes sense. Whereas I'm starting to try and shift that now and think, no, you've written this book and the publisher plays their part and it's a huge part, but you need to try and play your part too.
So before you had won this competition, was the process, were you kind of doing all the bits that someone who wants to be published is doing? Like, are you searching for an agent and publishers, or was this kind of just on a bit of a whim that you entered?
Yeah, I mean, it was in conjunction with WH Smith, so it was kind of everywhere. And it was only the second one that they did. So I think it was on BBC News. It was quite a big deal. And so many people who knew that I'd always toyed with writing were sending me emails saying, oh God, you should enter this. You should enter this. So I did. And I think you had to submit your first 10 or 12,000 words and then they would shortlist months later. So no, I hadn't sort of been through the whole hustle of looking for an agent or anything like that. That was part of winning the competition. You won a publishing contract and an agent who's phenomenal, and I'm still with her 4 books later. But yeah, I didn't go through that sort of whole submission process to agents or publishers. It was just kind of submit it. Whoa, you've won, go. It's almost doing like a life audit of what is actually, or maybe not even a 5-year plan, a 2 or 3 year plan. What is really, really, what are the top 2 or 3 things that are the most important to me? And then everything else you need to let go and just focus on those. I've just read this book called, I can't remember the name of the guy now, and I've only just read it. It's called 4,000 Weeks. And that's,
I know the one.
Have you read it?
No, I've heard about it. I've not read it yet.
Yeah, so it sort of starts from that kind of bleak premise of, on average, we all have 4,000 weeks to achieve what we want to do. But actually, he comes from it you think it's going to be this productivity book of how to achieve everything you want to do. Actually, he comes at it from the sense of, you'll never achieve everything you want to do. You just need to be really clear about what's most important to you and forget everything else. He actually, he quotes, I think it's Warren, is it Buffett? I never know how you say his guy.
Warren Buffett.
Buffett, is it Buffet?
Yeah, no, it's not that fancy. No, Warren Buffett. Yeah, he is the from the Berkshire. One of the richest people in the world. There we go.
Yeah. I did the old hyacinth bouquet on him. He quotes him, and he'd sort of given this advice about, right, think about everything that you want to achieve in your life. Write down the 15 things that you want to achieve, then order them. Take the top 5. And then you think it's going to be, and then take the next 5. But no, it's take the top 5 and then literally cross out everything else, screw that piece of paper up and throw it in the bin and forget about those other things. Because if you don't, you probably won't achieve those top 5, or you won't achieve them to the level that you want to. And so, I mean, I'm getting really academic about this now, but I think that's where I am. I'm trying to get a lot more focused on, yes, you could want to do all these things. We all, would love to be top of the Sunday Times list, to have a TV show, to all these things. But there's only so much you can achieve and have a life outside that as well. We all have personal lives and social lives and commitments, etc. So it's about really kind of it's just focus, really focusing on what is it I want, and then thinking, could my writing be a lot more focused? Could I get more out of it if I put it all into the time of the day where I know, and really ring fence it, as in, no popping out to meet a friend for coffee, not, all these things, say, no, I work best between 8 and 1. And therefore, barring an emergency, there will always be an emergency. That is what I do. Phone off, social media off, bang.
Yeah, I think perhaps more worthy shows than this describe them as non-negotiables. Well, I guess at this point in your life, what are your top 5 or top 3 things that you're looking to work to?
See, I don't know. That's the problem. I'm still trying to work it out. I mean, we could all sort of throw out those, I'd love to, I've never had a Sunday Times bestseller. All my books have been optioned. They've never quite got there for various reasons. I'm working on a spec script at the moment. I think maybe having that hybrid with TV would be really interesting. And, I've had sort of enough feedback from a couple of producers to know that I'm kind of on the right path there. I'm not necessarily wasting my time. So they're all, I suppose, quite lofty goals. It's how you break them down into, okay, what am I going to achieve?
And to a degree, Caz, is that almost outside of your control? Like, you do your bit with the novel. I know quite a few books are optioned, but it's time and place. There's so much that happens in the entertainment world that's outside of what you can do. So how much is it beneficial to you to think about these things?
Well, I suppose, yeah, in terms of having your book optioned and selling it but yeah, there is literally nothing other than, cash the check and cross your fingers, basically. But I suppose, yeah, I'm starting now to dabble in it myself and writing a spec script and sending ideas to production companies. So, yeah, that's the bit that I can control. But I suppose when you said about, what top 3, yeah, I mean, the difference is you say top 3 goals and then top 3 things that I would love to see happen. They're 2 different things, because, yeah, some of the things I would love to see happen, there's not an awful lot I can do about them. I mean, really, a Sunday Times bestseller is really not in your hands. You can write the best book that you can, and then you sort of, once the copy edit's done and the page proofs go in, it doesn't really belong to you anymore. It's your publishers, and you just sort of have to cross your fingers and hope. So that is, that was a massive learning curve coming into publishing, about really how little you control. And I've got plenty of author friends, and I'm sure you've spoken to many, many authors, that still struggle with that on a daily basis, that we know we can't control things, but you still feel like, if a book doesn't do so well, you feel a sense of disappointment or whatever. But ultimately there is so much, I think you mentioned before, timing and luck and, magic in those things.
I generally feel like it's perhaps the hardest time ever to be an author, because so much of it now is your responsibility that it wasn't before. So if you take, 30 years ago, you would write your thing, you'd send it off, it would hopefully be marketed well, you would then be asked to go on a few shows or maybe get on telly or something like that, and that's all you could do. But now, in the age of social media and so many book events, there's so much pressure on you to do your bit, right? To use those other hours in the day to get the tweets out, to get the emails, to do the mailing lists, to do the blog tours and all of that. Yet really, you've got a lot of that pressure on you. But at the end of the day, what makes it sell is the marketing that is done that's out of your hands, really.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's where not the difficulty, but it just depends on you as a person, you as an author, because some authors absolutely love that side of it and, are really good on TikTok and all those kind of things. And that's what everybody says. If you really enjoy doing it, do it. it's not going to do your book any harm. It's certainly not going to do your book any harm to do that. But then you have kind of the other end of the spectrum. I mean, one of my favorite authors, Tana French, she's not on social media at all. And she said, it's not because I'm not a social person. It's because I'd never write a thing if I was, because I do, I love interacting with people. I love having the crack with people. So I just fear that the writing would suffer. So literally she releases the book every couple of years. I think she'll maybe have some big spread in the Times and one other sort of, big, whoa, this is Tana French's new book interview, and that's it. She goes away then, and I'm probably simplifying it a little bit. I'm sure she does more than that, but generally it's a case of it's almost like she's wheeled out for a month to promote the book, and then she goes back in and writes the next one until 2 years later. But she certainly in the US has had phenomenal success, and she's very acclaimed in the UK and Ireland, etc. So she's kind of at that level, I guess, where you can go, no, social media won't work for me and my writing, so I'm not going to do it. I think it's a little bit harder when you're in the trenches and there are people that do it, and that doesn't mean that if you don't have a social media presence, or or you're not incredibly active on social media, that publishers aren't interested. I think ultimately it's about the book and the hook and whether they believe they can sell it. But certainly if you're somebody that will kind of work with them, then that's going to do you no harm.
More from Caz in just a second. If you're enjoying the show and if you'd like to have more episodes in your feed, then the best way of doing that is by supporting us over on our Patreon page, patreon.com/writers routine. I always say it's just me that does this for you, doing all the work, all the interviewing, the researching, the reading, the promotion, all of that to get you chats with the best authors around as often as I can, more or less once a week at the moment. And if you would like to help me do that, supporting us on Patreon is the best way to make that happen. For just a few dollars a month, you get access to our writing community over on there. There is book reviews, there is little insights into what happens behind the scenes, there is merch, bonus content, and even a way for your book to sponsor this show. It doesn't require a lot. Anything that you can drop my way goes an extraordinarily long way. I really assure you that. It helps me keep doing this as often and for as long as I can. So to make that happen, to just help out a little way, get to patreon.com/writers routine. Let's dive back in with Caz Frear then, chatting through her new novel, 5 Bad Deeds. You can hear more about the book in just a sec, where the idea came from, how she got to know her character, Ellen Walsh, well enough to shove problems her way. Also, we chat through the current pressures of being an author, how helpful having to do everything is if you're a creative and really you just want to write books. And we get back into it around 30 minutes in, by finally getting to the point of the show and chatting through her writer's routine.
A standard day would be, I'm an early riser. I'm generally, I think I'm an early riser, but I generally wake up about 6, and then I'll spend an hour or so, probably less than an hour actually. I always read in the morning, because that's really important. I mean, that's another part of the job, reading other authors' books and quotes, etc., etc. So I always spend probably about 45 minutes reading when I first wake up, and then I try to be at my desk for 7ish, and then I literally can be a bit later, but I literally do sort of office hours. So I will write. I'll have about a 15-minute break mid-morning. I'll write again. I'll have my lunch. I'll write again. My husband gets home about 5:30. So that tends to be my cutoff point, unless the deadline's coming up. But yeah, that is, and depending on where I am in a novel, that can be my life week in, week out for a number of months, really. That, just really, really treating it like an office job. As I mentioned, I'm looking to change that with the novel I'm writing at the moment, and I have to a degree. But yeah, that's pretty much how it works for me. And then I might read again a bit more in the evening, or watch TV, or all of these things, help refill the creative well, I guess. So I try not to write too late, but I have been known to jump out of bed at 2 a.m. because I've woken up and something's hit me, and I need to write something in my notebook, which makes no sense the next morning. But I am a creature of routine. I think that's the only way I can get a book written, and it's always in my house. I'd love to, just for the kind of the social, not the social side of it, but I don't know what the word is, like the anti-loneliness side of it. I'd love to be someone that was like, oh, I can write anywhere. I'd just go to a cafe and crack on. But I don't know. I just find it quite distracting having other people around me. So,
but you mentioned earlier, though, that you can now write with noise, whereas you needed the dead silence. So that does show that you are malleable. You can change.
Yeah, I mean, the noise it's literally nearly every night my husband will come home and just say, I don't even know where you have this on. You can barely hear it. But it's just so I've got that flicker of voices and music in the background. So, yeah, I mean, I did go from just writing in complete silence to, no, I now need to sort of know that there's someone else in the room with me. So you never know. But even I've tried working on trains a bit when I've been going to a festival or something, and I've had that 2 or 3 hour journey, and I have, but it's probably not been my best work. I like my desk, my sofa, and to a lesser extent, my bed. That sounds really precious, doesn't it? I must have silence and I must have no one interrupting me. But this is what I'm trying to shake myself out of.
What constitutes a good writing day for you then? If you're keeping office hours, when you finish things up at hopefully 5:30ish, what are you happy with getting done?
Yeah, I mean, I am sort of a word count person to a degree because I plot so much. I kind of know what word count I need to be hitting if I'm going to deliver it broadly on time. So I'm quite a slow writer. And actually, I say I'm quite a slow writer. I edit as I go. So I tend to, because I've got that Excel draft where I've just plotted the whole thing out, I tend to only really do one draft and then submit to my publisher. And because I plot so much, I know I've worked with the same editor since I began, and she always says to me that, she knows she'll get quite a clean draft from me because I know the whole thing hangs together. There's obviously a lot of work to be done. I'll get lots of notes back on motivations, character motivations, and all those kind of things. But in terms of plot, I know it hangs together when I send it off. So I generally... a good writing day, and this is terrible, I think, compared to some other authors. A good writing day would be about 1,500, but anywhere sort of 1,000 to 1,500.
No, I think that's pretty good.
Generally what I hit, but they tend to be fairly good words.
Oh, yeah, that's nothing. No, please. That's
Oh, thank you.
Yeah, well, I speak to a lot of authors, and 1,000 tends to be the goal. Sometime, and most of the time, the 1,000 is any word ever. I think for writers like yourself who are trying to get near and like as good as they can that first time, kind of close to what it will be. I would say, we've had 500, 750, so 1,500 is pretty good going. Because you are keeping off and. You are in a safe space here, okay? People who are listening are writers or aspiring writers, whatever it is, so they understand. How exhausting is it writing for that long a day? Because someone who's not a writer, and you say that's what you do, you write, you sit in a chair, maybe in your bed, for 8 hours of the day, and you try and get stuff done, and they might scoff and make out like that can't possibly be hard work, but it's draining. Like, how do you feel when your husband comes home and you kind of got other stuff to do?
Hurrah! I can hear his car pulling up. I know I'm kind of, more or less done for the day. I mean, it depends how it's going, I suppose. The hours can fly by, or every minute can feel like pulling teeth. It really sort of depends the confidence I have in the idea. But having said that, going back to, sorry, I keep going back to this, why I am sort of trying to change the way I work to a degree. I really do notice that in the morning, I can be really, really focused. And yes, somebody might call me, or I might check my emails and then end up having to spend half an hour that I didn't. But generally it's like, right, I'm here for writing. After lunch, I'll write a bit, I'll flit about, I'll make a cup of tea, I'll get distracted by a fly. Those kind of things happen. So I think that's probably because I'm mentally exhausted after spending from, whatever kind of 7:30ish to about 1:30ish, quite intensely writing. Whereas before I used to kind of beat myself up of, oh, you can never concentrate in the afternoon. You're useless in the afternoon. Those lovely voices. But actually, I don't know if that's a huge surprise because I do work fairly intensely in the morning. I could definitely sharpen it up. Like I said, phone off, no social media, those kind of things. But my mornings are for writing, and that's the end of it. So it's probably no surprise that after breaking for lunch and, going on Twitter, and Twitter can be, great fun, and you might get caught in having a bit of a laugh with somebody, or you kind of go in and think, oh my God, the world is going to end, and now I feel really sad. And Twitter is, social media can be either wonderful or depressing. So it's no wonder really that kind of the mental shift to then go back to my desk. So I'm kind of kinder to myself now, and actually trying to think, what is it that I can do after lunch for those, say, 3 hours until my husband comes home. It's not like when he comes home, I immediately stop writing, but it's sort of my cutoff point. What creative activities can I engage in those 3 hours that aren't as intensive as trying to get a good clean first draft down?
Let's just talk one little bit longer about the competition. So this was in 2017. You won the Richard and Judy Search for a Bestseller competition, which does what it says on the tin, for Sweet Little Lies. Then it was published a little while later. So you've had that joy, you've had that huge tornado of press and publicity and real hype around what you're doing. And then you need to get started on the second and the third. How was that? Yeah, I do a bit of acting every now and then, and I'm when the show is done, I'm awful, right? I get proper post-show blues. Okay, so I wonder if there's a similar, like after the Lord Mayor's show, about life after that competition and realizing that, okay, that was a brilliant start, and now I need to crack on and do it my own way.
Yeah, I think because I was just so naive, and I think all debut authors are naive. I'm not sort of holding myself up to be that different, but because it all happened so quickly in an unusual way, and I hadn't gone through, agent rejection and publisher rejection and that kind of thing, I think there was almost an element of, right, I need to go back and write the second book, but it will all be so wonderful again once that second book is out. And it wasn't. And that is, I speak to lots of people. I've got friends now who have their debuts, and we have, so the crime fraternity is a really strong network. And you're always sort of saying to people, you do realise, it doesn't happen to everyone, but you do realise that your second book probably won't be the fanfare of your first book, even if you think it's better. And it probably should be better. You've got more experience now. But it's going to be very, very different. But I don't think I realised that. I just thought, and because Sweet Little Lies had been really well received, and I was writing a series, so I kind of knew that the character had been well received. So it was the detective. So it was a case of, okay, I need to go. She just needs to solve another murder now, and we need to take those personal threads from Sweet Little Lies through. I'm not saying for a second I thought it was easy, because it wasn't. Second books never are. But I don't think I really struggled massively to write the second. I really struggled with the third, because the publishing experience of the second was so different, that that's probably when it kicked in of like, oh, right, okay, it isn't just about getting published, it's about a long-term career, and that will have ups and downs. And I think I only learned that from the second book.
Let's talk about the new novel then. This is Five Bad Deeds. Now, the blurb, well, not the blurb, the little tagline that they stick at the top of press releases. A gripping tale of revenge, loyalty, and the secrets hidden between the walls of the most beautiful home in town. Now, Ellen Walsh has done something very, very bad. If only she knew what it was. That is some hook. We'll get more into the idea in just a second. But how much does an idea, when it first comes to you, present itself in that beautiful, sellable way with such a tight hook?
Do you know, Five Bad Deeds kind of did. I wouldn't have been able to put it as well as my publishers put it, but the idea...
You're the writer, Caz. You're the writer.
Well, yeah, but they're better at sort of the hook and the blurb, aren't they? But the idea that they really got in that hook came to me really, it was really, really clear. And that hadn't happened with my previous three. With the previous three, I'd be at book festivals, events, whatever, and people would say, so what was the idea behind the book? And I genuinely would be kind of like, I don't really know. She's a detective, and I thought, maybe I'll do something with a serial killer in this one. And then, I'm sure there was some sort of nugget, but I could never really convey it. Whereas Five Bad Deeds was a bit of a, ka-ching, that's the wrong word. What I don't know what noise a light bulb would make. It was a lot. It was a light bulb moment. It was a light bulb moment, yeah. And I had sort of a very clear idea from the start about what the book was about, and that often doesn't come straight away. You can have a sort of great what if, and then you don't really understand the themes of the novel until you've finished the book, whereas I think Five Bad Deeds felt a bit more fully formed to me. It starts off very, very sort of everyday and mundane, but I was in a restaurant and we got really, really bad service. I'd had a really bad day. I wasn't in a great mood. We got really poor service, like rude service, not just kind of, a bit incompetent, rude. And I never, ever complain about anything. I'm one of these classic people that, will always kind of say, yeah, it was fine, thanks, even when something was terrible. And I didn't go out of my way to complain about the waitress. We were walking out and the manager sort of went, hey, bye, is everything okay? And I just had this moment of, no, I'm going to, actually, it wasn't okay. That was that. And then that night, I started really worrying about, the service was rude, but my God, what if she gets fired? Or my intention wasn't to get anyone into trouble. It was just, I was asked a direct question. And so I gave a direct answer for the first time ever in that scenario. But I really started thinking, oh my God, what if she just had a terrible day? What if her husband had left her that morning? What if there was, an awful reason that had put her in this kind of mood? And now, because of a really flippant comment that I've made, her life could unravel. And I really, really did start. So that's where the idea for Five Bad Deeds came from. The sense that even good people, we probably all believe we are good people, but all people walk through life making decisions and comments, and you just don't know when that could really have catastrophic effect on someone else's life. And so that was where it came from, that Ellen will discover she'll discover very, very quickly in not nice ways that somebody is really trying to dismantle her life. But she genuinely believes she's a good person. So she's kind of like, well, who would hate me this much to do all this stuff? But then as it goes on, you start to realize that there's certain decisions that she's made in her life where she didn't intentionally mean to upset anyone or harm anyone, but she really, really did.
So you've mentioned that you are quite a fastidious planner. You're all into your Excel. What happens next when you have an idea and a question that's posed to you as a plot? What would happen here? What do you do? What are you asking yourself to fill in that spreadsheet?
With Five Bad Deeds, I think I did almost have this inbuilt structure in place, because each deed, as it were, is almost like a very short story within the book. So things will happen to Ellen, and then you get the first deed and who she hurt, because all the people that she hurt are people around her in her life. It wasn't like me and kind of a random person that she interacted with. So I almost knew that I had these sort of 5 pillars throughout the novel, that there would be a different deed and the reader would discover something that Ellen did that wasn't a terrible thing to do, but could, rubbing up the wrong person, have terrible effects. So I knew I kind of had those pillars. So it was about it really was almost like in Excel, looking at, okay, so these are the 5 bad deeds. This is how long a novel is. And at each stage leading up to a deed, I need to just keep piling the pressure on Ellen and just making her life worse and worse and worse. So I almost did have that sort of inbuilt structure. And I suppose I had that also when I wrote my detective novels, because there's a certain thing with detective novels that, yes, you need to have a fresh voice and a fresh spin. But ultimately, there will be certain things that happen in any kind of murder investigation. They get to the scene where the body is. There will be a sort of first briefing. They interview the first suspect, those kind of things. So I've always had those building blocks in mind. I'm in awe of writers that can just sort of go, oh, I've got this idea for a character and a bit of a what if, and then just see where the story goes. And there are huge numbers of authors that write like this. I think I'd give myself a stomach ulcer. I need to sort of know exactly what I'm building to in each act, I suppose. I do think in terms of 4 or 5 acts in a book, and at each point at the end of the act, there needs to be not, as I said before, not a twist, but how do I spin the story in a different direction? So I do plan it in a really methodical way. Hopefully not to the detriment of character, because characters can take over to a degree as you're writing. But if you let them take over too much, I think you can it affects the pace and the suspense and the tension of the novel.
Well, let's talk about both of those things then. On the plot, what have you learned along the past 4 books that a Caz Frear novel, the genre that you're writing in, what you need to do, what it needs to have in, kind of the points along the way that you need to hit?
I mean, it's so different, really, for each book. I'm a big fan of the midpoint twist rather than the curveball ending twist, I think. I mean, there's always pressure when you not pressure, but yeah, you need to end your novel with a little bit of a food for thought, I guess. But I really love that midpoint when you think something is happening and then the novel completely turns in a different direction. So I'm generally working towards that. What else do I need to have? I mean, it's not really from a plot perspective. It's interesting because a lot of my novels are, even though I do sort of plot with tension and suspense and ramping up the pace always in mind, I always get people, and 8 times out of 10 they mean this as a compliment, but they often say your books are real sort of slow burns. And I think, I don't necessarily set out to write them as slow burns. Maybe it is because I'm trying to mix the characterization, make sure the characterization is as strong as the plot, that does slow down pace a little bit. But yeah, I think I'm probably not known for that. That's kind of an arrogant thing to say. I'm not sure I'm quite at the point in my career where I'm known for anything just yet. But I think it is that sort of slow burn, simmering. You know something bad's going to happen, but everything sort of seems okay for a little while. And then, yeah, at the end of, if I'm writing in 4 or 5 acts, I know that I need to build to something that's going to make the reader gasp out loud. That's a bit of an exaggeration, isn't it? I don't know. I think I've only ever gasped out loud at Gone Girl, and that's because it was probably one of the first of the midpoint twist books. So it was genuinely surprising, whereas now I think we half expect them.
Is the plotting more of like a top-down seeing the whole thing when you're looking at your spreadsheet? So you understand like what you kind of need in a novel, like you need the midpoint twist, you need a few other things, and you're working towards this resolution, looking at the whole picture? Or is it more of a chapter by chapter, this happens, okay, because that happened, what can happen next, and then what can happen next?
No, I think it is like a top-down thing, or it's like a bird's eye view of it. Because I plan out the whole thing. I need to know where I'm going, I think, to write confidently. So I'm never really thinking, where can this go next? Once I've started writing, I know where it's going. That doesn't mean, in every single book, there's been a little curveball. There's always curveballs once your edits come back, because, your editors will have a view on how we need to ramp things up more. But even in the writing, when I'm just doing my own draft, there'll always be something that I didn't quite plan for that I think, oh, that's quite interesting. But there's probably only one or two of them I generally know exactly where I'm headed. And I am looking at it a bird's eye view, as I think I said at the start. I kind of almost to the point of I colour code things. So there's a chapter where a red herring appears. There's a chapter where the reader is supposed to think, oh, I thought that was happening, but that. I have all these, so I can sort of see where it might flag, because a lot of books do flag in the middle. And because I'm generally building to that midpoint twist, I think I need to be really careful when I'm plotting that, if the twist is coming and that they're going to be, people are going to think it's great or whatever, you can almost kind of be you can be quite self-indulgent, because you think, haha, stay with me though, it's going to get really good at this point. But of course, readers don't do that. You need to pretty much hook them from the start. They don't know that this great moment is going to happen in chapter 12. And I think if I didn't plot as much as I do, then I'd probably rely on those end of act twists too much.
Final question then about the character aspect that you've been discussing. So this is all about Ellen Walsh, and the kind of blurb about her is teacher, mother, wife, all-round good citizen. Now, something like that could, like a character like that could become, I guess, a bit formulaic, if not written well. So what are you doing to know her well enough and chuck all these awful things at her to make her believable and authentic and rooted for by an audience?
She is all those things on the surface, but you very, very quickly find out in the novel that it is on the surface, and that, and this doesn't hopefully make her unsympathetic character, but that, she has uncharitable thoughts about her friends. She really doesn't like her mother-in-law, all these kind of things. So she is on the surface this all-round good egg. But quite quickly you find out that that's not really what's going on with her. And actually, I can't remember now, but I think it's chapter 5 or chapter 6. There is a major thing that would then make the reader think, oh, this woman isn't who I thought she is at all. So I think for the blurb, it is kind of, she's kind of your all round, she's does stuff for charity, she's on the PTA, all these kind of things. But I very, very quickly establish that's who she is outwardly. And it's written from her perspective. So it's written in the first person. It's actually multi-narrative, but I would say about 80% of the book is written from Ellen's first person perspective. So no matter what it says on the blurb, you're straight into her head from chapter 1. So I think the reader will know quite quickly that they're not dealing with a formulaic, nice person. Not a bad person, not a kind of cookie cutter nice egg.
And that is it with Caz Frear in this week's episode. Thank you so much to Caz for coming on the show. The new book is 5 Bad Deeds. You can get a copy right now wherever you normally get your books. If you can make it local, I think that probably helps everyone out. We will be back next week with a brand new guest on the show. In the meantime, you can support us at patreon.com/writersroutine. You can drop a review wherever you listen. You can get in contact using the page over at writersroutine.com, and you can always drop us a follow on X. We are at WritersPod over there. Also on Instagram, TikTok and YouTube, if that's how you prefer to listen to these things. We're everywhere, more or less. Hopefully, I will see you there next week with a brand new episode of the podcast. Until then, bye.